Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my series on the history of the neurodiversity movement. Today, we are going to go over what happened between the late 1990s and the mid 2000s. At this point, autism started to become a more common part of vernacular, and with that came a number of things. This chapter is a hodgepodge of different topics, and going forward, many of these videos will be. There's a lot to talk about and analyze from this era in particular. So, on the timeline, we mostly moved on from the 90s, though some stuff from then will be briefly mentioned here, and are now at the turn of the millennium. I will mostly be going over what happened in the early 2000s, but I will also be jumping around a little bit with a history, because with a history of about only 30 years, it's hard not to. The chapter will end in 2007, so about the mid 2000s. In 1997, a former British doctor known as Andrew Wakefield published a study. This study claimed to find a correlation between the rising prevalence of childhood vaccines, particularly the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines, MMR, and the rising rates of autism diagnoses. He concluded that there must be a connection between them, and that vaccines cause autism. Plenty of people were suspicious of these claims when they came out, but the study itself was later debunked. It turned out Wakefield intentionally manipulated the data for it to say what he wanted it to say. Wakefield lost his license as a doctor in 2010. However, he is still promoting this supposed link, and he really sparked a movement against vaccines. This is known as the Antivaxxer Movement. We're really seeing the ramifications of the anti-vaxxer movement as of late with the hesitancy behind the COVID-19 vaccines. The thing is, Wakefield is not entirely anti-vaccinations. He wants to discredit the currently approved vaccines as a way for him to promote his own vaccines. The fact that autism was becoming more well known around the time that the anti-vaxxer movement was birthed had a huge effect on the discourse surrounding autism. There were several bogus theories about what caused autism before this, whether it was Leo Kanner and Bruno Bettelheim's refrigerator mother theory or Bernard Rimland's leaky gut, but this was really the hot new theory that took hold. I think it's the most well-known false autism cause. There were even more false theories about autism that became popular around this time that you'll see in the next slide. A researcher from the United Kingdom named Simon Baron-Cohen developed a survey that later helped professionals diagnose autism. This is called the autism quotient. He later published research that concluded two main things: that autistic people, including autistic girls and women, had an extreme male brain. What this meant was that the traits commonly seen in autistic people were a result of excess testosterone in utero, so while they were developing in the womb. He concluded that the autistic brain was on the extreme end of the typical male brain. This theory has been contested for years, though Baron-Cohen is still a renowned autism researcher. You can see on this slide that I have a little meme that shows the extreme male brain. This was made by Sarah Kerchak and posted on her Twitter. I think it's pretty funny, so I put it on here. Baron Cohen also theorized that autistic people have a deficit in empathy and theory of mind. Both of these theories have had long-lasting effects on the kinds of autistic people who got diagnosed and who tend to go undiagnosed until adulthood, if ever. I'll give you a hint. It's not usually cis male autistic people. Even with greater awareness of autism and visibility of autistic people during this era, which I happen to have grown up in, there are many autistic people assigned female at birth and autistic people of color whom I personally known that have had to rely on self-diagnosis. There are several other barriers to an autism diagnosis as well, and an official autism diagnosis is not always beneficial for a number of reasons, but this notion that autism is more common in boys and white people has created a massive bias within the systems that diagnose autistic people. Things are getting better, but there's still much progress to be made on that front, and Baron Cohen's theories have made it more difficult over the years. The belief that autistic people lack empathy has also been a significant cause of stigmatization. I think it has a lot to do with why in popular media, autistic characters tend to act robotic and cold towards others. Also, in the late 90s was when the term neurodiversity came to light. An autistic sociologist based in Australia named Judy Singer wrote her honors thesis. In it, she talked about autism in a postmodern, social constructionist, disability rights, and feminist perspective. She discussed how autism and other neurological disabilities were not anomalies, but were rather a national variation of the human mind. I talked about this in the introduction video. Now, the term neurodivergent was coined around the same time, but it was separate from Singer's work and does not mean the same thing. Singer has mentioned in her more recent work, as well as on Twitter, that the way neurodiversity is used now is not what she initially set out for it to be. She mainly was referring to high functioning autistic people with her theory of neurodiversity. Many proponents of the neurodiversity movement would contest that. They think it also applies to autistic people who are non speaking, have intellectual disabilities, and high support needs. Many autistic people who fit in those categories are also part of the neurodiversity movement as well, and some of the pioneers of the movement were as well, as we have discussed. So I don't think it's a bad thing that neurodiversity has encompassed a larger scope than Singer intended it to. I think, if anything, it shows that what she expressed in the late 90s was somewhat limited. Obviously, it was more in line with the neurodiversity movement than other theories I've discussed, but it also shows that there was more work to be done, even within autistic spaces, to be truly inclusive of all autistic people, something that we are still struggling with. That's what history is, though, a work in progress. What may seem revolutionary now will likely not be in another 20 years. What was seen as revolutionary 20 years ago is only somewhat revolutionary now. That's why I'm here to give you the ins and outs of this history. There was another theory similar to neurodiversity devised in the late 90s and early 2000s known as Neuroqueer. Neuroqueer is a very academic term, so it's honestly hard to even describe in layman's terms, but it is basically the study of neurodivergent people engaging in discourse about their own neurology and viewing neurological disability through a social identity lens. Neuroqueer is also a verb. A number of scholars behind the development of this theory, including Nick Walker, Remy Yergo, and Athena Lynn Michaels Dillon. Neuroqueer also refers to how neurodivergence relates to and is a form of queerness. I honestly don't see this used much in autistic spaces, and when I do, it's usually someone referring to themselves as such. Another set of terms that emerge from this that can be found in the publication pictured in this slide, Neuroqueer Heresies, is the neurodiversity versus the pathology paradigm. This looks at the two different lenses that neurodivergence is looked at. Pathology is often how professionals look at autism and similar disabilities. As pathology, a deficit, something that needs to be fixed or treated, the neurodiversity paradigm says that no, this is neither an accurate nor respectful way to look at it, and instead looks at it from a social justice lens. This is very similar with the medical and social models of disability, which predate the neurodiversity and pathology paradigms. If anything, this demonstrates how the work I'm mentioning here is not very original and simply takes established work and slaps autism and neurodiversity onto it. People use the pathology and neurodiversity paradigm terms quite often, and I guess I don't really mind that. It's just that you could say medical and social models and basically say the same thing. And even then, there has been work that expands on the idea of a medical and social model to really view disability not only through a more intersectional lens, but also by looking at how some disabilities, particularly chronic illnesses, are not things that can just be accommodated away, but rather are things that do need treatment. So the problem isn't always societal barriers or even ableism alone. If you're black and disabled, you might find a space that is accommodating towards your disability, but you may still face barriers on account of racism. Tiffany Hammond wrote about this in Zoom Autism magazine. I think there's still that uniting thread between disability subcommunities of wanting to be free from abuse and mistreatment. And I really think ending that is more important than anything else. So we've gone over a lot so far in this chapter, and there's so much more to talk about. I'm going to break this chapter up into parts because of that. I hope you enjoyed part one, and I hope you look forward to the next part where we'll talk more about autistic led online forums.